So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on a sunny afternoon in Wicklow. I'm not sure where everybody else is today, so don't hate me if you're not getting the sunshine, but it's pretty nice where I am. You're all very welcome. We have a packed agenda with Jennifer O'Dea here today, talking about difficult conversations. We're going to kick off with a very nice conversation and welcome Jen to the Institute. You're very welcome. And I think this is definitely a topic that has resonated with our members and our students here today, because we have a packed audience. We have about over 300 people registered for this event today. So that obviously speaks volumes. So we're delighted to have you along today. So I'll hand over to you. We don't want to waste time chit-chatting when there's more important things to do. So thanks so much, Jen.
Great. Thank you, Dee. And it's a great pleasure to be here. Many thanks to the Chartered Accountants for inviting me along so kindly. So today's conversation is going to be about managing difficult conversations, those conversations that we all much rather avoid. But actually, if we just approach in the right way, then there's no reason to fear them, and there's no reason to feel why we can't succeed well during them. So let me introduce myself. My name is Jennifer O'Dea. I'm an executive coach, and I'm also a corporate role player. What's that? That is somebody who goes into firms and organizations, banks, universities, teaching hospitals, all of that, and allows people to enhance and practice their leadership skills. So I work in a role play situation around a scenario, and the leader or manager is trying to manage one of these difficult conversations with me. So who knew there was such a job? Well, there is. So here I am, and that's what I do. And the other thing that I am is an actress. And I do less of that now than I used to, but I trained at Trinity College in Dublin as a professional actress, and I worked in the Abbey and the Gate and the Project and on radio and all of those things that a jobbing actor does for many years. So I'm hoping throughout this to just throw in a few pearls of wisdom that I picked up as an actor along the way, and that I find really useful in the work that I do now. So the first thing to say is I'm going to be using menti.com today. So if I can ask you to access Menti on your phone, don't access it on your laptop, because then you'll sort of miss out on where we are on the slides. So just go to your phone, Google or whatever your search engine is, put in menti.com and put in the number that you see here on the top. That's the number there. And in a moment, I'm going to be asking you to input something. And so it's really nice interactive software. So that's where we can start with that. So what's on the agenda today? I'll get rid of my ugly cursor. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about preparing yourself for one of these conversations. Then we're going to talk about planning it. How do you plan to best hope for success? Asking powerful questions. That's a real nugget, a real golden nugget when you're in this kind of situation. Along with powerful questions are your listening skills and the power of silence, how that can help you. And then finally, there's going to be a Q&A. And one of the things that I'll ask you to think about as we go along is, I'm going to leave plenty of time at the end. So put in something that's pertinent to you. I've tried to anticipate maybe what I have found over the course of my work. So what would you like to ask me about that's relevant to you, your own sort of bespoke situation, if you like? And just to assure you, that Q&A is completely anonymous. I can't see, nobody can see who's put the question in, so you can go ahead and be nice and brave there. Right, so the first thing I'm going to ask you to do with your Menti on your phone is to put in, how do you normally feel before you have to have one of these difficult conversations? Just give us one adjective. Put that in now. And let's see what kind of emotions are stirred up. Anxious, nervous, awful. Yeah. The bigger the word gets, the more common it is throughout the audience here. Sick, yeah, very classic. Awful, fearful, apprehensive, concerned, yeah. Stressed is a big one. Yeah, look at that. Nervous and anxious and apprehensive are coming up. Sweaty, absolutely. And can I say, these are all things that an actor feels before they go on stage very often. So often, this is all related to and tied up with performance And we talk about performance analysis, and we talk about, improving performance and performance conversations and, PDPs and all of that type of thing, performance management. And every time I hear that word, I just think of my acting background. And so I just think there are lots of correlations, and I think the business world can just borrow the robes of the actor every now and then. So look, the first thing I want to say is look at those words. Look how negative they are. And, going forward into doing something that is tricky and carrying that negative energy with you, you're setting yourself up for failure. So that's one of the things that we can do straight away, is to change those feelings, or to tackle them. As Shakespeare would say, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So let's start by taking that as the place we want to move away from, that negative energy. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is preparation. And every actor knows, I'm sure you've all heard of Stanislavski. The method system really started with him, the Stanislavski method, it's known as. And the name of his book was An Actor Prepares. So the first thing that you really need to do about one of these difficult conversations is prepare for it. No actor will walk in off the street and walk on stage and do a very difficult task. Acting is a very difficult task, and so is having one of these difficult conversations in business. So what kind of preparation? This is my favorite quote. I'm sure you've all heard it, but there's no harm trotting it out again. If I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 6 hours sharpening my axe. Now, I'm not suggesting you spend 6 hours on every conversation, but can you sleep on it? Maybe. Even if you can spend half an hour or 5 minutes thinking and preparing, it is definitely going to benefit you when it comes to that performance. So what kind of preparation? Very basically, physically and emotionally. So let's look at physically first. Here we all are, sitting at our desks, sitting in front of our laptops, inert really for most of the day. So the first thing I would strenuously advise is to stand up, move, stretch, change that sort of atmosphere and that energy in your body. Step outside if possible. Just get a sense of the bigger picture here, the world, get oxygen into your lungs. Identify tension in the body. Now, I'm sure we're all familiar with mindfulness and how important that is. I'll give you another anecdote from Stanislavski, seeing as I've mentioned him already. He talked about his acting teacher when he was in the studio. And he got one of the students to, he gave them 3 questions. One was a mathematical problem. One was a memory. He wanted to ask specific issues to draw back on a memory. And the other was to relay his route to work to the rehearsal studio that day. So he asked them the 3 questions, and he asked the student first to go over and to lift up a piano. It was a grand piano, always a piano in a rehearsal studio. So to lift up the piano while he was answering the questions. And the piano was extremely heavy. So he was lifting the piano like this, and his whole body was in this complete state of tension. And he couldn't answer the questions. He couldn't even think of the route that he had taken. He had to put the piano down and then answer the question. And so the teacher was making the point, you can't function and you can't be your best when your body is in a state of tension like that. So step number 1 is just identify that tension and just shake it out. Now, that could take a minute. You could be sitting, even when we're all back in the office, you could be sitting at your desk. Just take that minute. Just prepare yourself. Get rid of it. Identify the tension, get rid of it. Just be aware of it. And of course, what goes with that is your breath. Now, we all know how important and how restorative the breath is when we're in an anxious situation. Remembering back to those strong, powerful adjectives that we saw in the Menti slide, nervousness, agitation, heart racing. That is what your breath does. Your breath calms you down. It lowers your heart rate, scientifically, physiologically. Now, I'm just going to talk, I've put a picture up here of the skeletal frame. And I think it's really useful to look at that and to just imagine your lungs encased inside that skeletal frame. And if you think, most of us spend most of our time doing what we call in acting clavicular breathing, and that's your clavicles there. So the breath is all up here. And when you're an actor, you're trained to push that breath right down into your diaphragm, which is a huge muscle that goes across the bottom of your rib cage. And the reason for that is twofold. One is to address all that anxiety that can happen in a performance situation. But the other is that physiological, I mean, look at that skeleton, look how rigid that is up at the top there around the clavicle, where we do all this kind of breathing. That does not move, and that cannot move. So your lungs are trying to expand. And if you're breathing up here, there's no hope of you getting that really refreshing and cleansing deep breath that you need. Whereas if you push that breath down, and try it now, put your hand on your ribs and take a deep breath down deep into your belly. You put your hand on your ribs, you realize that your ribs, and you remember that your ribs open out like that, like an accordion. And why is that? That is to allow those lungs to fill with air. You simply can't do that if you're breathing up here. And when you're training as an actor, that's one of the things that obviously they teach you, that deep diaphragmatic breathing. But when you're acting a scene where, say, you have to be, upset or something, that you get this shallow breathing going up like that, because that's a way to make things, to make yourself upset. So they're physically connected. So tip number one, I mean, we all know how restorative the breath is, but think about the logic of it, and that will really help you. So practice those breathing. Give yourself an opportunity to get that breath. Again, when I was training, by the time I left my 2-year training, I was able to breathe in for 3 and out for 28, which is quite a lot. I couldn't do it now. An opera singer could probably do 50. And that is the power of those muscles to expand like that and to go back. So it's like any other muscle in your body. You can work that, and you can make that work for your advantage. Of course, the other really powerful thing that the breath does is it supports your voice. And, one of the things that I've really discovered, and, there's no medals for discovering it, it's kind of common knowledge, common sense. But when we're all at home working, sometimes you talk to somebody on Zoom, they may not have spoken to anybody that day. So when your voice is not kind of cracked open, it can be rusty, it can be crinkly, it's not going to work to your best advantage. And your voice is your ambassador. I mean, particularly in this new environment we're in, when we're losing so much of our body language. So that lovely breath supports that voice. It gives you an authoritative voice. It allows that voice to cross over and to reach that other person. So all of this is something, singing in the shower is A1. I recommend that. And, if you're on your own, just allow a few sounds to come out, that kind of thing. And feel that breath supporting that nice sound. You get a nice, richer sound. A good voice makes you sound more confident and makes you feel more confident. Actors spend an awful long time working on their voice. And if I'm going in to do something on radio, I'll do a full vocal warm-up. Now, I'm not suggesting you need that, but, road test your voice, basically. And even if it means just, have a conversation with someone, or sing a little song, or make some kind of sound, crack open your voice. Okay. Now, the next thing, prepare emotionally. This is a really important one. And, people just don't prepare enough. The only preparation they do is they dwell on those really negative sounds, like, oh, I feel awful, I'm dreading this. How many times have you said that to yourself? So put yourself into a better frame of mind before you start, before you press, go on your Zoom connection or on your call. So what can you do there? The breath, regulate that breathing, get it under control. Spend a couple of minutes, connect with that deep diaphragmatic breathing, and give yourself a chance. Okay, next thing, take a moment to focus on the task ahead. What am I trying to do here? What am I going to do? I'm going to talk to X about Y. I have to do this. I need to address this problem. So focus your mind. Check in with your emotions. Are you ready for this conversation? If you've just had a huge argument with somebody and your blood is boiling, I guarantee you are never going to get a good outcome out of having the conversation at that stage. So maybe you need to come back to this conversation tomorrow. If you're not calm and emotionally ready, then don't have the conversation. It's like trying to negotiate with the drunk person. It's never going to work for you. So give it space, give it time, back away. Let's talk about this next week. Next week, it's that old kind of counting to 10. You'll be ready. You'll be more ready for it. So check in with yourself first before you check in with that other person. And then think about them. Are they able to receive you? Are they in a fit? Are they in a rage, an absolute rage? I was working recently with some solicitors, and one of the partners said he'd had a stand-up argument with somebody. And in the heat of the argument, they were just firing things backwards and forwards to each other. It was a classic example of how not to go about something like that. And they said all sorts of things that they totally didn't mean and regretted. And they, have an important working relationship together that they need to maintain. So, we worked on coming back to that conversation and how better to approach that the next time. So definitely, I think, are you ready? And anticipate, are they ready? And if not, don't have the conversation. Hold off. The next thing is, who are you speaking to? I'm sure along the way, most of us have come across psychometrics, fancy word for personality type. Who are you talking to? Is this person an extrovert? Is this person an introvert, shy? Is this going to be excruciating for them? Particularly if you're working with multicultural teams, virtual multicultural teams. What's the best platform for them? What are their values here and their preferences? How should this conversation take place? Maybe this should be an email. Maybe this shouldn't be a conversation at all. So this person will have an opportunity to digest. Some people respond really well to, what you said was wrong. Yeah, well, I didn't like what you said. And that's kind of very, sort of alpha dog, if you like, the Michael O'Leary type style conversation. If you must, it wouldn't be my preference. But, so think about that. Think about the way an actor, again, thinks about character. Who am I talking to here? How am I going to best achieve what I want? And this is very much about your efficacy. It's not about pandering to that other person all the time. It's about, how can I achieve what I want here? And how can I connect with this person and make this person understand that what I'm saying is important for them and important for me and important for our whole team. And by the way, this is true for personal relationships as well. This is not strictly speaking connected to work. I mean, obviously I'm, pitching it at that today, but this is the principles of all of what I'm talking about today very much are true to other more kind of general difficult conversations with people. So we can't have a conversation around this without talking about emotion and without talking about conflict, of course. So we all have one of these. And of course, our brain is such a powerful and intricate microchip in our computer system, to continue on my metaphor there. So the different parts of the brain we all know, and the more primitive part, the kind of caveman brain as it's known as, is very much responsible for this kind of emotional reaction that we have to people. And that's known as the amygdala, and it resides in the limbic system, which is the first part of the brain that developed from when we started walking upright and trying to make tools and things like that. So it's a very instinctive, very rudimentary, crude part of the brain that was, designed to keep us alive. There are no nuances in there in the amygdala. So up here in the more kind of outer section, we'd have the more sophisticated part of the brain, and that's the part that is going to help us with these kind of conflicts and difficult conversations. And that's the neocortex. So look, I'm no brain physicist here, and you're probably aware of these terms. But your amygdala versus your neocortex, there's a couple of really basic things to bear in mind. So your amygdala is where this conflict energy triggers you, basically. That's where your emotional system lies. And that is that famous fight or flight or freeze reaction that you have when you come into context with something that either threatens you or, makes you flare up. And of course, it's responsible for pleasurable things like sex and, the kind of hunger and all nice things that, again, very instinctive, animalistic part of us. But the big thing here is the amygdala hijack, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And this thing I just like to spend a moment with, about being triggered. So again, the triggering that happens when you get into some kind of, emotional state with a difficult conversation, there's nothing you can do about that. The triggering that happens there is a sort of result of the upbringing that you've had, the value system that you hold, the circumstances that you have come across and come through in your life. And your triggers are not going to be my triggers. I recently witnessed two people having, a really quite vicious argument, I thought, and one person threw down money on the ground and shouted and stormed out of the room. And I was absolutely shocked by it and completely triggered and in a complete state. And I said to the other person afterwards, how did you keep your cool there? And the other person said, I'm used to that. Someone I live with is like that. And I was so kind of overwhelmed by what I had. I was sent to shock. And the other person just was water off a duck's back. So it's really important to know there's nothing you can do about that. You get triggered and you get triggered. And a really self-aware person will understand their triggers. And I think that is really key, strong thing that you can work with. What triggers me? And I know if that person shouts at me, I cannot function and I am going to go into a rage. because nobody ever shouted at me. I never had that kind of background and I don't have it now in my life. So for me, that's a trigger. And I know I can't respond well to that. I just freeze or else I fight back, or it's just not a good place for me to be. So that's my amygdala responding. I need my neocortex to kick into gear here. It's much more sophisticated. And this is where the logic comes in, the rational problem-solving part of my brain and our brains. This is what we need to lean on. If we rely on the amygdala, God help us, we'll be in an awful state. So the amygdala response, unfortunately, can overwhelm the neocortex. And this is when you see people fighting in the street and just with the reaction that you get from this kind of thing. So this is my first exclamation mark. You cannot control the arrival of emotions. Somebody triggers you, you're triggered. It's as simple as that. Those emotions are there. You can't do anything about that. You can be aware of it. That's it. Now, this is the important part. You can control the behavior associated with that emotion. And that's really the important piece that I want you to get out of this bit so far. So somebody really annoys you or irritates you or inflames you. That's happened. And there's no right or wrong to that. It's just happened. However, you then get an opportunity to choose your response to that. And that might be in a week's time, might be in a day's time. If you're very sophisticated and you're used to this, it might be in half an hour's time. And it's important to be timely when addressing this type of conversation, coming back to the person. So what is it that you're going to do about this triggering that's happened? Okay. This is a useful little exercise that I've found coaching people and with myself, actually, I have to say. It's really simple, but like all simple things, it's really effective. Lay out 3 chairs for yourself. Sit in the first chair and relive that exchange, that argument, that conflict, whatever it was. Tell it from your perspective. Go through all the details. And why are you upset by it? And what is it? And what is it that's triggered and why is it wrong? And what should be done about it? And get it all out there. Then physically stand up and physically move to that second chair and retell that same interaction from the other person's perspective. Now, it takes a good bit of generosity to do that. And it takes a good bit of sophistication, if you like, and maturity. And can I say leadership skills? Sit there and think, why is that person so upset about this? Why did they feel the need to shout? Why did they feel the need to walk out? Why did they feel the need to tell me to stick my report or whatever it was? Try to tell it from their perspective. Well, I had a lot of work on that day. I'm understaffed. They don't seem to know about me. Whatever it is, be generous. This is completely private work. No one is ever going to know anything about it. It's just for you. And then when you've done that, stand up and move to the third chair and try to tell the story of this conflict from an objective, as if you were a journalist writing up the report, person A asked person B to do something. Person B flashed back with something inappropriate. The reasons were, from person A's perspective, X, Y, and Z, and person B's perspective, A, B, and C. Whatever it is, you'll find when you finish that, and that might be just 5 minutes, again, private work, you will find that you have more of a general understanding from the other person's perspective, and it can put you in a much better situation in order to take the next step. So try that little exercise. Again, it's really simple, but it does work. I found it work with other people and with myself. The next thing is plan for the conversation. Don't go in there hoping for the best, you know, fingers crossed. You know, like anything you're going to do, I've planned this webinar. I haven't just said to myself, okay, I'm going to go on there and talk about a couple of things to do with acting and, you know, maybe difficult conversations. And sure, look, we'll see what comes into my mind. I know this is going to work out okay because I've spent a lot of time planning it and executing it. And it's the one thing that you can really do to put yourself in an advantageous situation, stack all the odds in your favor. So the big thing that people ask you when you're an actor, the first thing they always say to you, how do you remember the lines? If I had a penny for every time anyone said that to me. And there's only one answer to that, and that is rehearsal. And the word rehearsal comes from rehear. That is the name, that is what that name means. When you are an actor and you're working on something, you replay it again and again and again and again and again until, you know, as my grandmother would say, you know it like your prayers. And anything that you do on stage, it'll just be there for you. Now, I'm not suggesting that you spend 4 or 5 weeks rehearsing a conversation, but I am suggesting that you think about what are you actually going to say to this person? You know, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm ready, I'm going to have this conversation. How are you going to actually start? Often the first 2 minutes are the difficult part. And you'll often find if there is a conflict or something difficult, the other person is going to be welcoming, at least, you know, ready to, they will want to resolve this conflict. Unless there are some serious, maybe psychological issues or a serious divide, split that has happened that needs serious mediation. If it's a working relationship you have, you need to resolve this conflict. And you need to have this difficult conversation. Maybe it's giving a negative feedback and the other person doesn't know that it's a conflict. You still need to start well. You need to start appropriately. How am I going to say it? Am I going to ask for to them to speak first? Am I going to send them an email? Am I going to, you know, what am I going to tell a story? How am I going to go about this? And what's the objective in the scene? So if you think, you know, Lady Macbeth, she wants her husband to go back in and kill the king. So, you know, that's what she wants. How is she going to do it? She's going to pick up the daggers and put them in his hand, and she's going to give him all this motivational talk. Go back in. If you're a man, you'll go in and do it. You know, so the main thing is the drive for her is enough. The drive is going to get her to do it. She's got her motivation. Kill the king. So what is it? What is it? I want to have a better relationship with this person. I have to let them know that their work is not good enough, or that the way they speak to me is upsetting me. Whatever it is, that's your motivation. One thing I'm going to suggest to you is try using a model. Those of us who work in business and in management are very familiar with models. Very quickly, I'm just going to go through 3. I'm sure you're aware of the GROW model, an aid feedback model, and a little model called CIA that I really love. So the GROW model is normally used in a coaching environment with somebody else. I suggest that you try to use the GROW model very quickly on yourself. So the G for the GROW model is the goal. What is the goal? Lady Macbeth's goal is I want to kill the king. I want him dead. So what's the reality here? Well, the reality is my husband's after coming out saying he couldn't do it. And the sun is rising, the time is passing. I better drop the Lady Macbeth. I better drop the Macbeth analogy. Maybe it's going too far. So the goal is maybe I need to tell X that I'm upset with them because of maybe how they spoke. And the reality is I feel really nervous about this. In fact, I'm afraid I might cry on the phone call. What am I going to do about that? Okay, I'm still angry. Whatever, check in on all of the things that are there at the moment. And then you move on to the O part. What are the options? Well, I could write them an email. I could call them. I could go to visit them, I could do a Zoom call. What are the options that I have here? And then finally, what's the way forward? I can not do this, which really isn't an option. Or I can, report into a senior, or I can just make a date. I can prepare myself, right? So try to use the GROW model on yourself. Get yourself into the right zone for this. Another one I really like, and this is great for feedback, if you have difficult feedback to give somebody, is this AID model. And the first thing here is you describe the action to the person. So you might say, Dee, when we had that meeting this morning or yesterday, I thought that you spoke very sharply to the intern or to me, or you were very dismissive of this idea, whatever the thing that you observed. So you're looking for your facts there. Get your book of evidence out, if you like. Now, the important part of this is the impact, I think. So you've got to tell that person the impact of their action. So the impact of that was, I could see that, Jen shied away then and went into herself and didn't speak for the rest of the meeting. Or, I could see that you raised temperatures there for everybody. Or, I could see that somebody again snapped back at you, and then there was tension, everybody was under tension. Whatever the impact is, it's really important to connect the impact with this person's action, whatever they did. And then the D there is for the desired outcome. So in going forward or in the future, when we have a meeting, if somebody makes a suggestion, even if you don't think there's value in it, I'd like you just to take that suggestion on board. Let's have this kind of free space for blue sky thinking to encourage people. Because if we don't encourage people to make suggestions, then they're going to dry up. So what I want to see in the future is the desired outcome there. Now, those of you who are working in team leading or supervising or managing, I really recommend you try this AID feedback model in a positive way. Get that kind of way of working up and running in your team. So, Dee, just I want to say, I thought you handled that webinar this morning, or that meeting this morning, the way you chaired that, I thought you handled it brilliantly. The impact was everyone was so engaged, and desired. I'd love you to, maybe share what you did with the team, or keep up that fantastic spirit that you have going, or that energy that you bring to. If you drop in those little kind of positive feedback, interactions, then you're building up a fantastic rapport and trust with your team. So when the time comes for a negative one, the person is much more likely to accept that. This is what happens. I get feedback from my boss, and lots of times it's right, it's good, and this time there's a developmental aspect to it. So I would really recommend trying that in a positive way. It's really simple. What did you do? What was the impact of it? This is what I want you to do going forward. And finally, this is a really simple one. I really love it. And I've used this with my teenagers, and it works really, really well. Ask yourself, what can I control about this situation? What can I personally influence here? And this is the big one. What do I have to accept? Sometimes there are situations you just have to accept and you can't do anything about. Sometimes you can influence them a little bit, and sometimes you do have control. So ask yourself, allocate what part of this am I working on? Because if you're trying to work on something that you have no control over, then you just keep on banging your head against a brick wall, and there's a negative outcome for everybody. So think about maybe one of those models that might help you in your preparation, give you a structure. The old classic questions. If you're going in there and just determined to have a conversation, as you call it, with somebody, but you're just doing all the talking, then it's just a monologue, and every actor loves a monologue because all the attention is on them. So if you really want to interact with that other person, you need to bring them into the conversation, and you need to find out what is going on in their world. Think about the 3-chair exercise. That middle seat is really, really important. Why is that person behaving like this? There's got to be a reason. Everybody believes that what they do is the right way to do it in this world. I always think I'm right. And that's because that's the way I live my life. So that's the way we all live our lives. We act in the way that we think is right. And that other person was doing the same and trying to honor their values. So you need to understand. If you don't understand, then okay, you might get a quick fix. You might use your power in a very kind of authoritarian way, and they might do it for you, but you're not doing anything for the relationship, and you're not doing anything to get over this hurdle, and the same thing will happen maybe in a couple of weeks' time. So you need to understand. So open questions or closed questions? So we know the answer here. Open questions, open up the conversation. Closed questions, do the opposite. So yes or no answer is not going to get you very far. So look at the difference between, are there problems with the timeline on this? Yes, there are. And what are the problems with the timelines on this? And look how tiny the difference is there. You're just putting a WH question word in front of it. That's all. You're not reinventing the wheel. And more personal, do you feel fed up? Yeah. That doesn't get you far with your teenagers. How do you feel? Or how are you thinking? What are you thinking at the moment? That's going to definitely open things up a little bit more. So these are the words I recommend you use to actively think about the WH question words. What, how, when, where, who. They are going to allow the conversation to just become richer. You're going to get more information. You notice I haven't put why in there. There's a little health warning that comes with why. It can sound a little bit, it can provoke a little bit of a defensive response. You know, what did you do there? Well, I did this or that. Why? Well, because. So you just, you know, it's just a little bit, it's okay to ask, but just seem as if you're putting a bit more effort in there. Can you just go through the reasons for that, or outline, you know, what you thought you might achieve by that, or, you know, just, I mean, it's just, I'm not saying never use it, just a little health warning, just a little asterisk beside it. This is a classic. Avoid multiple questions. So, you know, you can be the best question maker in the world, but it's something I come across really frequently in training sessions, and it can be really overwhelming for the person. And also the key thing here as well, that they'll choose which part of that question they want to answer. So you're lowering your efficacy again, you know, by, you know, remembering you want to achieve your goal here. So you're going into something and you're saying, you know, like, I'm just trying to understand what happened there, you know, and why we missed the deadline. Was it because that you didn't have enough resources, or was it because that you were, you know, working on those two reports at the same time, or was it because? Well, sorry, what's the question? So, pick a question. If it's a good, powerful question, it will work for you, and give the other person time to respond, to listen and respond. Don't go rushing in with your very next question, because you're just cluttering up the space, and the, you know, you need, the conversation needs oxygen. Bearing that in mind, listening skills. You can't have a webinar about difficult conversations without this big one. This is a big one. Lovely quote from Stephen Covey, who's the author of 7 Habits of Highly Efficient People. Did I get the title wrong? Something like that. 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. That's it. And this is the best one in it. Seek first to understand, then be understood. If you go gung-ho into your conversation, you know your side of the story. You don't know theirs. And you're never going to know unless you try to understand. Ask a good open question. Listen for the answer. And get the full picture. Find out what is going on here. So I just absolutely love that quote. And I think it's a great one to sort of to bear in the back of your mind when you're heading into this kind of environment. Now, he talks about 5 levels of listening. The first level is ignoring. And this is when it can be very positive. If you're in a busy office, that none of us are at the moment, and you're trying to work, you're just tuning out. Or, you know, if you have toddlers coming in trying to show you their best, you know, handprint, you're just like, yes, that's lovely, dear, right? And you're just ignoring. Second one is you're pretending to listen. So you're like, yeah, absolutely, that's great. Yeah, great, that's fine. Next one is you're selectively listening. And I think this is where a lot of us spend a lot of time. You're listening, but you're listening looking for the opportunity to come back in again. Or you might be listening for something that backs up how you feel about the situation. You're not necessarily listening for a real deep understanding. So it's more about to sort of, yeah, well, exactly, that's what I mean by this. Or, yeah, well, I'd like to actually say, So it's selective listening. You're not listening generously. This is a good level. Level 4 is attentive listening. And this is me. I'm listening to you, but I'm also taking into account your body language. Think of the actor again on stage. They're not just going out there saying the lines and the other actor listening. They're using their whole body to express what it is. And, in this new, very much reduced world that we're all communicating in now, excuse me, opportunities to use that body language are limited, but they're not gone completely. So that's the time when you're listening for tone as well. You sound to me like you don't feel very content about this. That's okay to say. Recognize what you see in front of you, or you look, if you don't mind me saying so, you look a little bit negative, or whatever the term that you'd like to use is. I can't help noticing that you seem a little bit down when we talk about this, that type of thing. So attentive is you're observing, you're listening not just to the words, but you're looking at all the parts and you're listening to how they're coming across. And finally, empathetic listening is when you're completely in their world. You're in their flora and fauna, and you are totally understanding the situation from their point of view. Now, that can be an exhausting place to be all the time, and I'm not suggesting you're always there, but be aware there's a generosity there in stepping into that world and genuinely trying to understand what it is that has motivated this person. Because remember, that person believes they're right too. So empathetic listening, empathic listening, they say as well. So the last four, number 4 and 5 are really healthy, good, generous, mature places to be listening to somebody else. And of course, along with listening, our old classic, silence. The power of silence, the perfect partner, the powerful questions and listening. You might ask all the powerful questions in the world, but if you don't allow silence for that other person to think and also respond, then it's a waste of time and energy. Susan Scott has a lovely quote in her book, Fierce Conversations, which is a great read if anybody wants to delve a little deeper into this area. Let silence do the heavy lifting. Again, I just love that. So a couple of things. What does it do? It encourages the other person to speak, obviously. It's not just a monologue with the witness. It makes them feel heard, which is crucial if you want to bring that person with you. It can diffuse tension. Now, I'm not talking about a passive-aggressive kind of standoff kind of silence. I'm talking about the tone. It's changing the tone. It's bringing things down, allowing calm and pace to slow. If it's very difficult and maybe there's personal things going on for that person that you know nothing about, if you're asking empathetic, gentle, you're bringing your tone down, you're encouraging, allowing those silences, you might get some very important disclosures about something that's going on for this person that you had no idea about. And instead of just rushing off and going, oh yeah, well, the EAP, HR can deal with that, you can just sit with it. Okay, I hear that. That must be very, very difficult for you. Just allow the space to be there. You would be amazed how much currency that buys you and how much trust that can build, because the other person realizes you're not solely on your own agenda all the time. You're taking the time to listen to what is important to them. So don't be afraid of silence, unless it's kind of armed to the teeth. Well, I'm not doing it to you. That's not the kind of silence I'm talking about. And think about any show that you've seen or film that you've seen. There's so much happening in those silences. And often it's the silence that can bring you to tears in the theatre, or that beautiful moment where somebody might just do an action or just stand there. It can be massively emotional and just a powerful moment. So don't be afraid of it. Sit with it. Often it can allow the conversation to go in a different direction that you didn't know anything about at all. Again, you can allow that to happen. You might find gold in them there hills. Takes the pressure off you to be leading all the time. It's an exhausting place to be. What'll I say next? What'll I say next? Remember level 3, selective listening. Allow yourself to be surprised in the conversation. You could, if you don't know what to say, you could say something like, what do you think is important for us to talk about now? That is a really open, honest, genuinely difficult thing to say. It's brave. There's a bravery there. And that can take you in a whole new place that can really open up stuff and resolve issues. I couldn't leave without a quote from the man himself. So from Shakespeare, from King Lear, have more than you show, speak less than you know. I think that's such a wise quote, and only Shakespeare would put those words into the words of the fool in King Lear. The man who has all the wisdom is the fool. So you might have all the solutions here. Don't give it all away. Don't give it all away for free. It's not necessarily their best solution. You just need to find out here. Speak less than you know. Listen, get into that listening zone. So we've come to that part. We're coming towards the end. I'm very aware that I would love you to put some questions here for me if you go back to your device on Menti. And while you're doing that, anything you like there, anything that might be relevant to you, or ask me about something that I've said. And, Dee, if there's any comments coming in on the chat and the Zoom, we can talk about that as well. And, hopefully there'll have been a couple of little tips there that you could probably take away from today. So knock yourselves out. Anything that you'd like to ask me there, go for it.
Well, Jen, I'm just coming back in here to say that was quite frankly mind-blowing. I was scribbling away. There was just so much gold, as you say, in them hills. But thank you so much. I've learned so much today, and I think a lot of people here today will be going away with a toolkit, frankly, with to have at their disposal when they're having those difficult conversations, because we all have them. And I certainly, you spoke to me when you're talking about teenagers, and I love that idea of the CIA model, and it kind of made me think about that pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. So we can go back and bang our head against the wall when we're dealing with the teenagers, but I think actually the acceptance is key in a lot of these, and just understanding that there's only a certain amount that we can control when we're dealing with whether it's teenagers or difficult situations in work or wherever. So thanks so much for all of that. So look, there is some questions popping up there, so I might just let you fire away, and
okay.
If you can see them coming up, so we can kind of keep the chat going, and you can maybe see how you go.
Great. So does it always work? Look, I mean, I'd say no, nothing always works all the time. What these are my ideas, are what I'm offering is ways to approach something difficult. Like you might have somebody who maybe is not in a position that they can negotiate with you. And maybe there are reasons for that. Maybe there are psychological reasons for that person is going through, that you can't, again, the CIA model, you can't do anything about that. You have to accept that. But if we could change the adverb there, does it always work? Does it often work? I would say yes, absolutely. And I use it in 90% of my work is doing this with people. And I use it with my own relationships as well, and in other contexts. And yes, these things work. So, I mean, what I would say is be brave and give it a go. The big thing is take the focus off yourself, put the focus on them, and you'll find things will work for you. I have a hard time letting go when the other person doesn't accept that I was right. Yeah. I remember when I said, I always believe that I'm always right all of the time. And I'm sure you do too. Try sitting in that chair, that second chair sometimes. Maybe it's not the fact that maybe you were right. But maybe that's not, something I think comes to mind. Do you want to be right, or do you want it to be right? And maybe your focus should be on the relationship here. And so that, okay, maybe you were right, but let's talk about what happened there. What's there, was it worth it, basically? The ramifications of you being right, the kind of ripple effect. And we talk about the, again, Susan Scott, she would talk about the emotional wake that you leave behind you. And you're responsible for that. When you leave an uncomfortable conflict, what are you leaving behind you? And is it worth it? But then if you say, yeah, well, I was right, I don't know. And, maybe that person isn't mature enough to recognize that you were right, but you need to be. And you need to leave it. And okay, maybe if it's an operational thing, then, you can just refer to it, and you can do a feedback situation there. Maybe try aid on that. And you don't have to ram home that you were right, but you say, look, this I think probably works the best way, and going forward, you might use it that way. And again, the title of I was right isn't helpful in these situations, I would say. How long or short should these conversations last? That depends. If you get into a really good vein of like listening and asking questions and respecting each other, you know, it can be an hour, it can be an hour and a half. If it's just a piece of feedback that you really need to hand over to somebody, then it can be short. It can be 2 or 3 minutes long. You know, like I'll take the one I gave, you know, maybe you have somebody who's writing a report. I'm assuming a business context here, but of course, you know, there are other contexts. So you could say, you know, Dee, that report, unfortunately, the report you gave me this morning, unfortunately, some of the data was wrong in that. The impact was the whole thing is now going to be delayed by 2 days. We're going to miss that deadline. So going forward, I need you to double check your work there in order for it to be accurate. Okay, so can I ask you to go ahead and do that? That's a less than 1 minute conversation. Now, you might find that you're going into a different area, a different zone, and then the conversation, it's as long as a piece of string. That person might be good to go after that. So it depends is the answer to that. How can you put the other party at ease? Well, you can be empathetic. That's the first thing I'll say. You can say, look, I know this is difficult. It's difficult for me. I know it's difficult for you. I hear you. You can, you know, respond back to what they've said. Right, okay, so you've said that you're really overwhelmed in work. Okay, I hear you. That is very difficult, but I don't want you to be overwhelmed. So, you know, maybe when we've finished talking about this, let's look at other ways to free up time for you or to make you feel more empowered in work. So, you know, like let them get out, you know, what else? What else would you like to say? What else? Okay, is there anything else? What else? Okay, so is there anything else? Eventually they'll come to the place and say, no, there's nothing else. And so if they feel heard, they are definitely going to feel more at ease. Plus, you know what's bugging them. So it's a real win-win situation. So you need to go in there with respect for that person. Even if you're furious with them, you still need to allow that settling of that tension and that emotion that I talked about to dissipate a little bit. Any suggestions for when you're trying to have an empathetic conversation, but the other party, more senior, is not engaged in the same manner? Yeah, that's a classic one. Okay, so the first one I would say to you is, you know, is it just an apathy? And that's going to be a difficult conversation in itself. Or is it because there's emotion attached? Are they angry about something? If it's apathetic, then you need to have the bravery to say, look, can I talk to you about something? I feel sometimes I come to you with ideas and I feel that, you know, that you're not terribly interested in them. And the impact of that is it makes me feel really, you know, frustrated and demotivated. And, you know, that has an impact on how I do my job. I'd love an opportunity to express how, you know, I'd love you to really take on board my ideas. How do you feel about that? Front load it, get it all up there and speak your piece. That's influencing up, and that can be more difficult, but it's not impossible. That person might be amazed that they're responding like that. But if you don't kind of broach that is a difficult conversation, then they're never going to know and it's never going to improve. So I'd say have the bravery to go there and, okay, they're senior in you in hierarchy, but they're still a person and you're a person. And that's all relationships are. They're one conversation at a time. And I mean, unless this person is completely, you know, autocratic, they are going to want a good relationship with you. And it's going to be worthwhile getting on board with you. And you know, they might say, oh, sorry, I didn't realize that. So it's in a very nice and gentle way. Don't be emotional about it. How do you speak to a generally quiet person? Yeah, that's a good one. Well, think of that spectrum we talked about, introverted. So you're not going to go in there and go, hi, how's it going? Great to be here. Listen, I want to talk to you about this. But, you know, approach them in the same way that their values honor. So, you know, keep your tone down. You know, keep your questions. You know, keep your volume down as well. Give them plenty of time to respond. That's a classic place there where you ask one question and you wait for the answer and you just keep on waiting. And you constantly show that you're listening, nodding, yeah, great. And you just wait for them to answer. You know, introverted people find Zoom extremely frustrating because it's all the loud people who are speaking and they can't get a word in. It's how they feel because the pace is too fast. So keep it quiet, keep it quiet. Any books or resources you recommend for conversations with narcissists? Oh, well, okay. So Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott is my big one. Go try that one. You could try try the Stephen Covey. Those two are a great place to start. 7 Habits of Successful People. Try those two. How can you help a non-listener to hear what you're saying? Well, again, I think you need to say, look, I feel that you're not listening and it's really frustrating, and stop. They have to respond to that. Just stop. A meeting takes it very heated. Yes, it's best to take a break. Absolutely. Guys, let's come back in 5. Let's have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and let's come back. Absolutely. How do you deal with difficult teenagers when they are the ones shouting all the time at you? You simply step back and you say, I can't respond to you when you're shouting. It upsets me too much. AID. Look, let's come back to this when we're calmer. And remember, you are the fully formed adult. They are still forming. You are the person who has responsibility for being the mature person. And it's a bigger person to do that. Look, we have a book recommendation. Fabulous. Stop Caretaking the Borderline or Narcissist. Very, very good. Thank you so much for whoever put that up. I'm not sure I'm going to have time to go through all of these. Okay, we're nearly there. How can we prepare for performance conversations where the feedback is largely positive? Great, but there are some areas of improvement needed. How do we build the trust of the individual? Okay, brilliant. I would say straight answer to that is build in those positive feedback conversations all the way through the year. It just builds up such a good bank of trust then. And if there is something, they'll be much more open to you. So it's great that you can go into that performance conversation and go, look, I'm so pleased with your work this year. I'm so pleased with the way you've done technically, the way you're this, that, and the other. I'm so excited for what you're going to do in the firm with us in the future. And I'm so glad you're on my team. Now, there's one area that I feel, no, ask them first. Are there any areas you feel that you can improve on? They might very well respond to that particular piece. And if they're not, then you say, look, there's one area that I'd love to talk to you about. And, let me see how you feel about it. And that's in the area of X. How do you think you've done that so far this year? And if they say, yeah, no, look, I think that we could move you up into the honors class in that area. Fine, bingo, you're done. Dee, I see the time and I know I have to stop. So I'm close to that.
Listen, amazing. You fielded those questions in record time. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Just to say that anybody, please feel free to link in with me on LinkedIn, send me a message. I'm more than happy if I can. I'd be more than happy to continue this and, answer those questions for you. So sorry, over to you.
That's a very generous offer. Thank you very much. So Jennifer OD, I'm assuming in the LinkedIn space, and maybe Jennifer or jenod@gmail.com. You might throw it in the chat there because it might be nice for people to, you have it there.
Yeah.
Might be nice for people to contact you and as you say, continue the conversation. But we're at the top of the hour. Unfortunately, I think we could all chatted a little bit longer. It's such an amazing topic, and I loved all the kind of acting references and a bit of Shakespeare and a bit of Macbeth and all that good stuff. So it really made it so interesting and accessible. So Jen, it just really remains for me to say thank you so much for coming along today. Lovely feedback coming in here on the chat and hearts flying all over the screen. Thank you so much. We'd love to see you again in the institution. I'm sure there'll be requests for more of this this topic because it was very popular and very well attended. So we're very grateful for obviously a lot of hard work that went into that presentation. It was really brilliant. So thank you very much, everybody else. Chris behind the scenes, CPD team for helping us put all of this together. And obviously just to remind people about CA support, that's your emotional and your practical support team here in Chartered Accountants Ireland. We are here. We're at the end of a phone for anything, so it's all there on the website. Please do go and have a check out of what we do, and that's it. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and thanks again to Jen. Take care. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.